We just got some news on my ID 1700 that I sent out. If you guys just watched the previous video where I was discussing how those injectors were causing misfire codes on my STI, well, stay tuned because I have the solution and problem breakdown in this video. We're gonna be doing some interesting analysis, but wait, we're not gonna do it here. That's right, we're gonna be changing things up and I'll catch you guys in just a sec. We're here right in front of my desktop with both of the injector service reports pulled up, both the pre and post cleaning, because I think it's really important for you guys to see the data that I'm talking about. That way the data and the numbers that I mentioned aren't just so arbitrary. So hopefully by the end of this video, you guys have a better understanding of how to read an injector service report and have a better understanding of how injectors work in a fuel injected car. Here is the injector service report from Injector Dynamics. Now this is the pre-cleaning data set. Starting off on the left-hand side here, we have the service order number blacked out in case any of you are trying to steal my injectors. I'm just playing. We have my name, the date, and the type of injectors I sent out, which are ID 1700s. Now, before we get into the actual data set here, let's talk about the test conditions. Test conditions are very important. They're going to tell us how the trials were done. And in this case, the injectors were flow tested at 43.5 psi at 14 volts at a frequency of 100 hertz. Now let's go over the data set here. Starting off on the left-hand side, we have the serial number. The serial number is a unique identifiable piece of information that each of the injectors have that are laser etched onto the bodies of them. They basically just identify each of the injectors with a unique alphanumeric, code. Next, you have the flow rate of each injector. These are ID 1700s, so you would expect them to flow around 1700-ish. If you look at the delta, the variance in between the numbers here, you see that they're all pretty close. I think at most there's a delta of probably about 15 or so. Next, let's talk about the offset. The offset is measured in microseconds, which is what that weird little symbol is. Offset you can think about as the delay the injectors see when the ECU is sending the voltage or the signals telling the injectors at what time to fire. You can look at the variance or the spread. You have a delta of somewhere at the most of, let's say, 60 or 70. Now let's talk about the things on the x-axis here, which are the pulse width measured in milliseconds against the flow deviation here in percentages on the y-axis. Now, if you look at the 2 millisecond pulse width all the way to 10, you see obviously it says out of spec here. So what does that even mean? At an injector pulse width of 2 milliseconds, that's essentially when the car is idling. That injector has a super small window of time for that injector to fire fuel into the cylinder for the proper combustion cycle to happen. And in this case, 247 and 248 are out of spec, because what happens is they add up the times for the set of injectors at, let's say, a 2 millisecond injector pulse width window. If they're over 4.0, then they're considered out of spec. Remember when I told you guys I was getting the check engine lights to trigger the most when I was sitting in standstill traffic? So that makes sense here of why the car was throwing misfire codes, because obviously the injectors are out of spec here. As you go up and in the injector pulse width window here, so 3 to 10, I was telling you guys when I'm on a wide open throttle, there's no delay, there's no missing, and you can see, you look at the total spread here at the very bottom when you add up all the delta, the variance here, when we were at a 10 millisecond delay, which is essentially wide open throttle, because that's a very big delay, you want as much fuel at 100% throttle, right? You have a variance of 0.3, which explains why we were not having any issues. Now, let's talk about the bottom here. This is how we can interpret the data graphically. So starting off here at 2 milliseconds, you can see the spread in between the injectors. And by the way, each of the injectors here are identified in different colors. So starting off on the x-axis here, we have that kind of rough idle, that weird variance here. And as you go up in injector pulse width, as steady state cruising happens or wide open throttle, the lines get closer and closer together at an infinitesimal amount, where they basically just all merge to each other. And that's pretty much what you want to see. In this case, you want to see a complete linear line across the board, because having a spread or variance across injectors is not a good thing. That's exactly why Injector Dynamics matches their sets of injectors, so that way when you get them brand new, you don't get one that flows at, let's say, 1761 and the other one that flows at 1670, because that's obviously going to be a big issue. Now let's talk about the post-cleaning data. So we're just going to stick to the data here. Let's look at the same information. So it looks like it got worse somehow after the cleaning, and I'll tell you guys why I think that is afterwards. We have a delta of 6.0 compared to, I believe it was 4.4, so we have an increased delay of 1.6 combined. And then when we go up to the next injector pulse width window here at 3 milliseconds, we have a total of 3.9, which is approaching that limit, that upper threshold, as we keep going up and up and up on the higher RPM range. As we go to a bigger injector pulse width window, that variance is going to be a lot less. And then we look at the graph here, and you look at the lines represented by the injectors, you can tell the spread is even worse. You can tell at the end of the graph, they don't meet altogether, which they did in the last graph. And what I think personally happened is once they were cleaning the injectors, whatever was stuck inside the actual body of the injector just got worse, and they just couldn't save them. And I can hear you guys now. What was the actual issue then? Well, the issue here shown by the data was 100% were the injectors. That explains the roughness across all cylinders, the random misfires, and all the other miscellaneous issues related to fueling. Now, what is the solution? Well, after talking to Injector Dynamics, they were nice enough to give me a 30% off discount on a new set of injectors. They're actually going to be arriving tomorrow, and I'm going to be throwing them on the car. We're going to be using those injectors to get retuned, and that should solve all our issues. I hope this made sense to you guys, but if it didn't, make sure to leave me a comment down below. Let's keep this conversation going in the comment section, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this in the future where we deep dive into a certain subject. I really like looking at data sets and interpreting them. Also, if you learned something new, make sure to hit the like button, turn it whatever color it turns for you. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one.